Okay, thanks to my wonderful people behind the scenes and behind the teams for getting the lobby all sorted out. Welcome, my name is Jo Martin and I am the State Secretary with the Queensland Beekeepers Association. My role in the QBA is basically the connection between government and industry. I support the work of the Queensland Beekeepers Association, the executive more broadly, and I just want to take a moment to welcome everyone in today to our Toolbox Talk for Friday, episode 2. First of all, to kick off, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we all are coming from today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Fortunately, today we've actually got the famous Rob Stevens back in again. So he's going to be taking us through a bit of a check-in on how everything's tracking and progressing in Queensland with regards to the varroa mite response and some of the great activities that we've actually seen in the last couple of weeks. Momentum is building, which is really exciting. My message is please continue to contribute to this program. It is just so important that we do get all of the runs on the board. We win the game and we deliver the outcome and end result for our industry. Also, I'd like to present a special guest to you today. So Bianca Giggins is the ARBIC varroa mite coordinator. I wanted to use this opportunity today to make everyone familiar with Bianca and put our face to the name that we've all seen on a lot of external ARBIC communication. Bianca's been doing an absolutely epic job on the front line. Bianca's also got her own personal experiences as well, which I think is of great value that we can all learn from and recognise that there's a lot of beekeepers out there that have had to take the hard hit for industry. And I am very, very thankful for everything that they've gone on and had to endure. But I want them all to know that we are absolutely behind them and we will move mountains to support people to get back on their feet again. Mark my word on that. Anyway, Bianca, I might just throw to you really quickly to introduce yourself and a bit of background from you, and then we'll throw over to Rob.
Thanks, Jo. Thanks for having me. And yeah, thank you to Queensland as well for having the ears to get me on board today. And I really appreciate the work that's been happening in the DPI at Queensland to get the 123 reporting done and all the work that's involved for all beekeepers in that. There's definitely a great amount of work happening for beekeepers on the ground to get that landscape freedom of varroa across all of the states. So a bit about me really quickly. I've been a beekeeper for 10 years. I've grown up in ag, chicken farming and cattle farming, which are probably the two other most difficult agriculture sectors, I think. I was a coordinator for the Certificate 3 beekeeping at Docal College for New South Wales DPI for 3 years. I really enjoyed having bees. Was in the front line, of course, being in the department at the beginning of the response. Everything stopped on the 22nd of June. And as a result of the response, I have lost my very small scale beekeeping business for the greater good. And I do support and can definitely give people an idea of what it does feel like to be a beekeeper in the red zones of this really challenging time. And I support all of the beekeepers as much as I can. So yeah, look, you can find my information and contact details on the ARBIC website. Please, if you have any questions or concerns, this is obviously a great toolbox opportunity. But aside from that, for anyone listening now and listening to the recording later, yeah, please reach out if there's something I can help you with. And I am here to support all of our Australian beekeepers.
Thanks, Bianca. It's always a fun environment when you're working from home. I too work from home as well. First of all, thank you so much, and thank you again for your commitment down there on the front line. It's definitely not easy, but we are so fortunate to have passionate people at our national industry body and people right across the length and breadth of this country, all doing what's necessary to deliver the eventual outcome for industry. Rob, I might throw straight over to you in the hot seat. So we'll go through, I'll mute. If you can, just keep your cameras off at the moment because it does help with our streaming to make sure that it's a nice, clear, consistent stream so that I can edit that down the track and pop that up onto the QBA's YouTube channel for you to watch at your own convenience. Over to you, Rob.
Okay, thanks, Joe, and I hope everyone can see my presentation today. Yep, so thanks again to QBA and Joe for setting up this series of talks. This is our second occasion. We're going to try and cover permits and some of the movement control information today, and I'll also touch quickly on some of the proof of freedom reporting that we've been doing, because beekeepers have been doing a great job and we really want to acknowledge that. So before we get too far into it though, I too would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land in which we meet today, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here today. So just quickly touching on the New South Wales response, Queensland would once again just like to acknowledge the significant work that's going on in New South Wales. It's a monumental task they're undertaking. We thank ARBIC for their significant contribution to that program, and we also thank QBA for their contribution to Queensland's program as well. We couldn't do this without them. So, as you know, after the response kicked off in New South Wales, Queensland immediately launched its own preparedness program. So that's where I come into things. I'm currently the manager of Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries Varroa Mite Prevention and Preparedness Program. The program aims to deliver a body of work mitigating the risk of Varroa entering Queensland. So the program's managing permitting and compliance requirements for the movement of bees and related carriers into Queensland, as well as increasing that surveillance to get to support area freedom in Queensland. So just to reiterate, to date, there is absolutely no evidence of Varroa being in Queensland, and we want to keep it that way. So, like I said, I want to quickly touch on the Autumn Blitz. We did launch this campaign earlier in the month. We're really encouraging all beekeepers to go out there and test their hives and report their negative results to the B123 form. Larissa's going to drop the link in the chat now for you, so you guys can, everyone should have awareness of this form by now, but if you don't, these are the testing ratios that we're asking people to contribute for that proof of freedom. If you've got 1 to 100 hives, you should be testing 48, 100 to 250, 55, and more than 250, 62. So it's going to get a little bit confusing today because we're going to talk about different ratios in relation to movement. But if you're doing your normal hive checks and your hives aren't leaving anywhere in Queensland, these are the ratios you should be testing. So just a couple of quick extra bits of info on that testing. So if you are just testing a proportion of your hives, make sure you mark those hives, get out there and test different hives next time. That's going to help us get up to that appropriate number of testing. So a big pat on the back to beekeepers so far in the month of April. We've had 162 submissions and we've had 2,841 hives checked. So majority of those have been since the 17th of April when we launched the campaign. I think nearly 120 out of 160 have been in the last 2 weeks. So, and also that it's really increasing the amount of people doing the correct testing now too. Everyone's getting in there doing the alcohol wash. We know no one wants to kill bees, but unfortunately sugar shake is just not a good enough test to be doing in the current climate. And it's good to see beekeepers jumping on board and doing the alcohol wash. So as of today, then the numbers, little shout out too that the commercial numbers have increased. We're up over more than half those submissions in the month of April have come from commercial beekeepers. So you can see this is the footprint of industry throughout the state, though. We want to make sure we're getting a good representation of all those beekeepers. So if you go back one step, you can see we do have some gaps. So if there's anyone around Mackay at the moment, Central Queensland, they're probably going to get some messaging from us in the next week or so. There's some of the gaps where we'd like to see a little bit more contribution and effort at the moment. But all up, really good job, and we want to see it continue. We're hoping to get 500 surveys complete before the end of June. So how do we get to these testing ratios? It's a quite complicated process that's going on in the background. We don't just arbitrarily make up these numbers. It's done with science. It's done with biometricians. We weigh up free market and we don't want to restrict trade, human rights, market access. These are all important things for how we determine testing and how we deal with the border closures. So there are 2 different types of testing. I've been talking about the proof of freedom testing at the moment, but the one I want to get stuck in today too is the testing as a requirement for permits and compliance. So if you're moving hives interstate, there is a slightly higher level of testing that's required, and this is nationally harmonised between all the jurisdictions. So all all hives must clearly be identifiable. So this is directly out of a permit that we would issue you, basically, this information that I'm showing you right now. So you've got to have your brand on those, and you should be marking those hives. You've got to test them at least, within 14 days of your movement out of Queensland. So if you've got less than 64 hives, you're testing all of them. If you've got 64 to 640, you're still testing 64, and once you crack 640, you're testing 10% of those hives. So all hives have to be found to be free of varroa, clearly marked, and then those reports need to be uploaded to our B123 app. So when you use that B123 app now, when you complete your submission, you'll be emailed a copy of your results. You can use that for us, and you can always also use that in other jurisdictions too. So if you're moving hives down for almond pollination in Victoria and you need to provide evidence of your testing, you can still do that through our B123. So one thing that is catching a few commercial beekeepers off guard is what is an apiary. Some people are associating an RBE, or a registered biosecurity entity, as an apiary, but it's a little bit more complicated than that, because you've got to think in terms of geography. You could have your 1,000 hives spread out across 10 different sites all across the state. So if your hives are more than a couple of K apart, they are an independent apiary, and they needed testing at that 64 ratio. So same goes with the proof of freedom testing. We're not requiring that proof of freedom testing, but we do encourage people to go out and test all their high risk sites. So, and if you do have multiple sites and you've got a lot to get through, we want you to have a think about risk assessing. What are the hives that are more exposed to those regular movements? What comes in contact with other beekeepers? They're the ones who you've got to do your own risk assessment and see which hives you should be testing. So just to put that in visually, this is just a basic map of how hive movements work. So you can see the complex relationships that happen when you start moving hives around. So it's really scary that you are at the mercy of other beekeepers and their own hygiene and husbandry. So everyone's got to do their part. Everyone's got to do their own testing, because you're all interconnected when you start moving bees around. So really, really important. So just once again, you guys should all have access to this by now, but if you haven't, we've got the link in the chat. You can scan the QR code. You can also download the app. So this is really useful for commercial beekeepers. So if you're going into a part of the state that has no mobile reception, you can download the app. You can you can enter all your data offline, and as soon as you come back in a reception, you can just hit submit. So it's a really useful tool that way. And the app actually keeps a record of your submission as well, so you can always refer back to it.
I might just add there, Rob, sorry, just really quickly. Sorry, you're going fantastically well there. Just particularly for the beekeepers running the larger volumes of bees, I'm very, very familiar that a lot of people are saying that the app is a little bit difficult to use with big fat fingers. So please know that you can utilize the website, the actual desktop form, because that's a very, very easy way that once you get home, it'll take you less than 2 minutes to upload all your information in there. So just to add value for that, there is the website alternative, not just the app.
Yeah, and
Thanks,
if
Rob.
you've got any real issues with, and it's just not working for you, you can call our call center too, and we're happy to walk people through it that are having significant IT problems, or just you don't have a phone, or you're not internet savvy. We're happy to help navigate that through with beekeepers that need it. But yeah, any questions, we're always available our team is available to help you if you're having trouble with the system. We think it's a really good system, but we're open to feedback if you think it could be done any differently. If there's issues that you're having in the field, let us know and we'll try and work through it. Just another thing too on your data. So we want to make sure people understand that we're not using your data anywhere it shouldn't be. We're not sharing this with any third parties. It's only being used for this biosecurity response. So as I mentioned before, what you do with your data is your own business though. So we have specifically designed the app now so it gives you a copy of your own submission. If you want to use that for an interstate movement application, if you want to use that for a pollination contract to prove that you've done your testing, even if someone wants that before they buy your hives off you, they want to know you've tested. These are all the things you can use this form for. But if you've got any concerns about how your data is being used, we might drop that link in the chat as well, and you can see our information privacy policy. But that moves us onto the permit system. So you do need a permit if you are moving interstate from an area that does have varroa mite. So that's New South Wales. At the moment, Queensland's the first state that has got rid of its emergency provisions. Most of the other states are still working in that space. Queensland moved away from the movement control order, and we've moved into a permanent zone system now. So under our biosecurity reg, there is actually a permanent biosecurity zone, which is the entire state of Queensland. So if you're moving bees into that zone, they have to have come from a state that is free from varroa. So I'll go back a couple of steps though. So basically that was one of the major tasks that why this group was created in Biosecurity Queensland, and that was to facilitate movement and keep the industry going. So movement control was a very big issue from the start, because come 22 June, the borders shut completely. Honey wasn't even moving without a permit. The first permits we did were for the big retailers, for Coles and Woolies, to keep the honey moving. Then in September, we refined that and started looking at hive movements for almond pollination. And then we've kept going and working with our counterparts in other jurisdictions, and we've formed an interstate working group, and we're making sure that all our conditions are harmonised to the best that they can. We understand it's very difficult for beekeepers who are nomadic. You could be moving through multiple jurisdictions. We want to make things as easy as possible for you and harmonise our movement control where we can, so you don't have to do 10 different levels of compliance to move your bees. So there's always going to be some subtle differences, and I really do encourage you to check with the jurisdictions you'll be working with. We can only control what information comes out of Queensland, but we are doing our best to work with the other states and harmonising all those movement controls. So as of February, that's when what I mentioned before, our movement control order expired and we moved to that zone system. And as of April, we've extended our permit system to also include the movement of queen bees from New South Wales as well. So it's probably a little bit late in the season for that, so that'll probably come more into play next season. So just to explain how we get to this point, it's not just us arbitrarily making up these rules. We work with the interstate working group. We also have a section within inside Biosecurity Queensland called the Risk Assessment and Scientific Analyst Group, and they work through the science on these things, and that's how we come up with the numbers. We work with the policy and the legislative tools we've got. We mix this all together, and this is how we come up with our conditions for permitted movement. So that is also relying on other jurisdictions as well. So it wasn't until 18th of January this year that the Consultative Committee for Emergency Plant Pests agreed that the New South Wales Blue Zone, or the General Emergency Zone, is considered free of varroa. So shortly after that is when Queensland began the issuance of biosecurity instrument permits for live bees from the New South Wales GEZ. Unfortunately, shortly after that, on the 17th of Feb, there was some unregulated movement in New South Wales, and it needed further investigation. So at New South Wales' request, we put a suspension on bees coming from New South Wales, and that stayed in place for a considerable amount of time while these issues were worked out. So we were still allowing the movement of equipment for irradiation, and we were still allowing supers to move. It was only the live bees that were suspended totally. Only 2 movements had actually taken place in that short amount of time, when the borders opened to when they shut, and they were both Queensland beekeepers. So it was only a week or two ago, as of the 21st of April, that we resumed the issuance of permits. Again, this was at New South Wales' request. They provided us with the information related to those illegal movements, that they had done all the surveillance, all the tracing, and that all the parties were in agreement that the GEZ is in fact free of varroa, and that there is no additional risk there. So Queensland was the first state to move. Victoria followed shortly after on the 26th of April, and South Australia is expected to follow in the next week or so, if not already. So again, the eastern jurisdictions are all trying to harmonise and make sure that we've got the same rules for everyone and keep it as simple as possible for beekeepers. So if you are applying for a permit, it's a fairly simple process, but it is a process nonetheless, and it can be a bit frustrating because it does have some steps. The first thing you've got to do is go on to our online biosecurity instrument permit portal, and Tanya's going to drop the link for that in the chat as well. Now, we're first to admit this first stage of the application is not very bee specific, and it's not that it's not that intuitive for beekeepers to fill out. You just got to think though, this is across the whole of our business groups and the whole of our department. This isn't just for bees. So when you go to the first stage form, you just got to pick your varroa mite carrier basically. So the first 4 carriers on the list are all varroa. You pick whether you're moving for irradiation, whether you're moving supers or you're moving live bees. So once we receive that stage 1 application, a biosecurity officer will make contact with you, and that'll be your contact throughout the whole process. So you'll basically be individually case managing. If you've got any questions, that'll be your point of contact. So they'll be asking you some basic questions on the type of movement, just to see that you are in fact eligible to continue on to the next step in the process. And then we're going to send you a link to what we call a stage 2 application form. So that's when you get to the more nitty gritty. That's when we're asking you the specifics about the hives or the carrier equipment that you want to move into Queensland. So once you complete that, you send this off the second stage application form to us. Our biosecurity permits team will start assessing that application, and the officer will be in contact with you if we need any additional information to be clarified. And then basically we'll make a decision of whether to either approve or deny that permit. So once we do that, we'll send you the permit, we'll send you an information notice, and we'll also send you a checklist. So we realise these permits aren't always the easiest thing to read. They're not written in plain English. They are quite legally worded. So we've tried to simplify that and give us a very simple checklist on how you can fill your obligations under that permit. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in a second, but that's basically the application. You do your stage 1, we make contact, we send you a link to stage 2, you submit that, we assess the information, and we approve or deny the permit. So it's fairly simple. So this is what the stage 2 permit looks like. I'm not going to guide you through the whole thing, but I just want to show you that it's been set up the same as our B123 survey form. So basically we send you a link to a varroa mite carrier application form, and we think it's fairly intuitive. It's set out very much like our B123 survey form. So we ask you some basic information on yourselves. We ask you what kind of movement you intend to undertake, how many hives, where they're going to, and then really important information is where the hives are coming from. And this is where some people get a little bit confused as well. We want to make sure people are putting in where the hives have been operating in that jurisdiction. We don't want to know where your depot is, where you've combined 6 different sites and you're loading them on a truck. We need to know where those hives were in New South Wales, because if an area does change its zone and goes into a red or a purple zone, we need to be able to track where the risk is. So we need to know where those hives have been. And then it's all fairly simple information after that, just some basic information on where your hives have been and what you intend to do with them, some of your transit information, what route you're going to take. And then when you get issued your permit, like I said, it will have some stipulations on it. You are going to have to do alcohol washing at that ratio that I mentioned before. You also have an obligation when you return home that you're going to be required to keep records of where your hives are for the next 12 months and do that 16-week alcohol wash testing for the next 12 months. And that's just based on the risks that it creates introducing hives from New South Wales. So we're confident the blue zone is free, but we still need additional measures in place. So just a brief overview of some of the permits we have issued so far, bearing in mind there was a suspension in permits for a while, but there's been hives moved for irradiation the entire time. So we've had that in last year and this year. Live bees, majority of these have just kicked off in the last couple of weeks since we reopened the border, and there has been a few super movements taking place as well. So there's only been a few permits that we've denied, and that's mainly been because people have just been a little bit premature, that they're applying for a permit that hasn't been in place at the time that they applied for it. So usually we're not going to get to that point, that we're not going to give you a stage 2 application unless we know you're qualified to be making that movement basically. So again, you can see that this last month has been our busiest month for applications, but again, that's related because that's when the border has been open. So as I mentioned before, we are trying to make this as simple as possible for beekeepers. So we want to have this in plain language that if you're not entirely sure of all your conditions under the permit, we provide a simple checklist when we give your permit to you. So if you just can work your way down this list and tick off each thing, it's going to tell you that you've fulfilled all your conditions under the permit. So there are some things you have to do before movement. There's some things you have to do during the movement, and there's some things you have to do after the movement. So, but it is your obligation. If you're the applicant, you are obliged to abide by that permit. Otherwise, you're breaching the legislation. Just wanted to quickly touch on the other jurisdictions, because we realise a lot of the interest around interstate movement is obviously around almond pollination. So just reiterating again that it's your own job to stay up to date with the jurisdictions you're dealing with. We can tell you what the current permit conditions are in Victoria, but this could change at any time. So I think Larissa's going to drop a link into the chat to the Victorian permit conditions page if you want to bookmark that page and then just keep referring back to it, because these things do have a habit of changing. Again, we're working with the Interstate Working Group. If we know of any major changes, we will try and work with QBA and let them know. So, and we've highlighted a few of these things that might be a little bit different to what people expect now. So in general, most of the conditions are very much similar to what Queensland's conditions are. You've got this arbitrary date of 1 January 2021. A lot of that relates to when we think varroa was introduced into New South Wales. We might never know, but that's the default date is 1 January that we go back to. So similar to us, all consignments must be inspected before they come into Victoria, and they require you to lodge that movement information with the Ag Department in Victoria. So something that might be a little bit out of left field for you, though, is that hives moving into Victoria cannot be split, sold, given away, or disposed of. So if hives go in, they must return. Now, I don't know if there's any exceptions there or anything. That's something you would have to take up with Victoria. But I know that's something that happened last time with almond pollination, that some hives made a one-way journey. Apparently, that's not an option this time. So just to factor that into your planning, that at the moment, Victoria intends all hives that enter to leave at some point. So if you want specifics on that, though, again, I would encourage you to make contact with the Victorian Ag Department. The only other thing I wanted to briefly touch on, and we'll probably have a separate session on this at a later date sometime soon, is just record keeping. So anything revolving around movement really requires accurate records. So we're not going to prescribe to you, you must do it our way. You can do a manual copy, you can use a spreadsheet, you can use your own beekeeping apps. We're actually in the process of making a few templates to provide to industry that you could use if you're not sure how to keep some records. But it's in everyone's best interest to keep a record. We're not asking you to submit it to us. We have no intention of you submitting your record unless there is a valid reason. So if we got a trace forward into an area of Queensland and your hives have been in that area, we might need to then see your movement record. But this is for your own record keeping. And again, we're not dictating how you have to keep this record. We're just really encouraging all beekeepers in today's climate should be keeping accurate records of where their hives have been. But I will say, if you are moving bees, you are obligated to keep a record when they return to Queensland for at least the next 12 months, and you've got to do that 16-week mandated testing. So hopefully we'll settle on those templates in the coming week or so, and that'll probably be our next topic for discussion in the next Toolbox talk is accurate record keeping. So we're happy to sort of walk people through that. Again, we're not telling you how you must do it. We just want to give you options and make sure everyone's doing something. Something is better than nothing. So, yep. But that's really it. So we're open for questions.
That was brilliant, Rob. Thank you very, very much. I might just further reiterate to that. So QBA have had a discussion with ARBIC with relation to the position on the permits with Victoria. So that is something that is being actively followed up at the moment. So just to alleviate any concerns there is a discussion happening. I think what we probably will be focusing on in the future is just trying to, as Rob said, simplify some of those permit conditions, so that we can actually make it as easy as process as possible for people to know. Probably I'm going to start the questions off, Rob, and then I'll open it up to the floor. So please, if you're online, if you've got some questions, start having a think about them. Use the raise your hand button that's at the top of the or at the bottom. It depends what device you're using for Microsoft Teams. But Rob, I'll throw one question at you while you just have a moment. So if I'm a beekeeper and I'm thinking about moving across borders in the next couple of months, at what point in time should I actually be getting in contact with the Queensland Department and starting to undertake that exercise about the biosecurity instrument permit?
I think some of it is going to depend on the purpose of the permit. Obviously, there's a few extra complexities if you are planning on almond pollination, and this was before varroa came along, that you guys have obligations in related to AFB, and you've got to start planning this process out long before. You're going to be dealing with contractors and all sorts of things there. But from our point of view, the more notice you give us, the better. That we're available. We can help individually case manage you. We can walk you through what the requirements are. We can try and guide you in the best direction. In terms of testing, though, you don't want to go too early in terms of testing. Like I said, your alcohol wash has to be within 2 weeks, but that doesn't mean you can't start your application process for your permit before then. You can have your application approved, and then it's one of your requirements of the permit to provide that testing. So you can definitely, if you've got your plans in place, you can do it 3-4 weeks out. We're happy to guide you through it, and then just don't want to peak too early on your testing, though. You want to make sure that's done in that 2-week window.
Entirely.
So
Yeah, I think that was particularly one of the challenges that our beekeepers, particularly our stranded QBA colleagues, when they were over the other side of the borders did open up for that very short period of time. And there was that really, really short window that people had the opportunity to get in and really test the volumes, because a lot of the beekeepers that were over there did have larger hive population numbers, but also acknowledging we had beekeepers there that only had a few hives. So it's really probably important that you do stay connected where possible. QBA, we continue to pump out a lot of information through our varroa mite portal. We're not necessarily sending a lot of emails out these days unless there are significant changes at all, or really important information that's influencing a trigger in the response plan. So make sure that you're accessing points of truth, I suppose, for your information when it comes to varroa. So I always say to people, if they ring me, the DAF Engagement Hub is a great place to start. Consider actually saving that as a bookmark in your Internet Explorer if you can, because the DAF Engagement Hub does answer a lot of Queensland related questions, and there's a lot of great video content and written content on there that can step you through everything. The second place is, of course, is the QBA varroa mite portal, and that's we've gone to great lengths to make sure that you've got as much information in one spot. That portal is going to evolve fairly shortly as well, so I'll be doing some back work, working behind the scenes with Steph to make sure that we've got all of the information there. So it's literally a one-stop shop. You can click in there, and then you can navigate where you need to be doing and what you need to be doing from there. So probably the biggest thing is the volume of testing. If you're thinking about moving across borders, I think it's important probably for everyone to be conscious that that they're pretty significant numbers that you do need to test. But making sure that you've got the capacity to actually undertake those tests. So, the onus is going to be back on the individual about making sure that their processes are spot on and correct at the time that they've got that window of opportunity to get cracking. Now, I'll throw over to questions at all. Does anyone have any questions? We've got quite a few participants in here, which is wonderful to see. There must be some questions about. Maybe feel free to unmute yourself.
One thing I just want to reinforce as well is that we've moved on a long way from last year, and our intention is to not let hives be stuck anywhere. So Victoria, Queensland, we're all working on contingency plans for if there are unexpected detections, and we're really hopeful that there's not going to be hard border closures like there was. We should have everything in place, that it should be a zone system. If we get a new detection, if it's traceable, we can put a ring on it, there shouldn't be any need to have complete border shutoffs like there were last year. We really need to ensure that the hives are moving this year.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And again, it's all risk assessed, and we don't want to do anything that would jeopardise the biosecurity of Queensland. But yeah, we're comfortable that we have the systems in place to make those risk assessments.
Sure thing. So is anyone in the chat? I can see a lot of familiar names in the chat. There must be some questions underlying in there. If you don't have a question, have you got a topic that you would like us to cover? Is there something that you would have a great appetite to learn more about? Feel free to unmute and let me know.
And we are recording these sessions too. So if you've got colleagues that you want to pass on the word, we'd really encourage you to come back and revisit these topics, but we're also available as well. You can give the call centre a ring. You can email that address on there too, info@daf.qld.gov.au. We are available to talk people through the process. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, well, we don't seem to be having too much interest in anyone asking
Can I ask
questions.
a question, Joe?
Yes,
Can I ask a question?
absolutely. Ian, fire away.
Is the department going to do any spot checks to see if people that have brought bees in are actually abiding by the rules?
Yeah,
on
most
alcohol
definitely.
washes?
Yep. So we've got a compliance strategy in place. So we're monitoring all the permits that are being issued, and then we're doing post-arrival spot compliance checks on those beekeepers to make sure their permit conditions have been adhered to. So we won't always be broadcasting where we're going and where, but yeah, it is definitely part of our program to make sure that people are abiding by those conditions for sure.
And it is a question that we often discuss and flesh out how the compliance programs are going at the moment, and so far they've been very, very successful. So
I should mention too, we might try and piggyback off that a little bit too, and do some opportunistic surveillance when we can too. Like if there's parts of the state that have got an influx of people coming across the border and going to, that's a good opportunity for us to get in some surveillance and put minds at ease that there's nothing being brought across. So again, these are the things we're doing. They're the priorities of the program, is trying to get trade, get hives moving, but also increase that level of surveillance and get the data so we can be comfortable that we are free of varroa in Queensland.
Does that help answer the question at all, Ian?
Yeah. Sorry if you'd covered it early, but I got in a little bit late. So.
No, that's not a problem. Julie, feel free. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Is the risk analysis that you use to come up with those numbers for just your general alcohol washes that you're submitting to 123, but then also the risk analysis for the numbers that you have that are slightly different for requirements coming into Queensland? Is that published anywhere as to like how the numbers came to be?
Not in entirety. So it's been developed through our biometrician teams internally. The 64 number is more widespread. There probably is a fair bit of information on that online, because that was harmonised between all the states, and we all fell on the same number. And it's only since then that some of the jurisdictions have been adjusting. So you would know that in New South Wales now, under their mandated testing, they've dropped to 26 hives. So they're trying to lower the regulatory burden, but basically they're mandated testing, so they've got more results coming in. So the higher burden of testing, the less apiaries you need to test. So that's why we need industry buy-in, because to get a 95% level of confidence that we're free, we need 500 unique entries and 15,000 hives tested. So that's what that ratio is working on in terms of the 48, and why it's a little bit number. It's based on those grand stats. If we're confident we can get about 500 entries, whereas individual hive movements is more at an apiary level. So that's why it's 64. And then it goes to 10%. And 10% is a bit of a nothing number, and there is a little bit of criticism from that in different circles. But you've got to have an alternative to give people. We're not going to expect people testing hundreds of hives. It's unrealistic. It's too high a burden. But we're also realistic that people don't have 640 hives in one location. They're going to be split up into loads, and unfortunately, you're going to have to treat each load as its own apiary in some instances. It depends on your distancing and depends on how you run your operation. If that answers that, it's basically some very smart people come up with those numbers, much smarter than me. So, yeah.
And Julie, we here at the QBA, we have had many discussions with people of that caliber and the biometricians particularly, so that more broadly our board can really understand the mark that we actually need to reach. So yeah, the 500 unique locations is absolutely paramount, and I have to share my enthusiasm. I'm not excited yet. I am enthusiastic because the numbers, 162 reports and a total of 2,841 hives. That's a wonderful effort that should be just quietly celebrated at the moment. We're still not there, but it is an absolutely firecracking start to what we've seen. So I'm confident as the conditions in Queensland particularly, we're starting to cool off a little bit, but we still do have those really great days with fairly calm conditions. So everyone should be actively getting out there, checking their hives. I know that I've had a few recreational beekeepers touch base with me via email and ask exactly what they need to be testing. So I think we'll do a little bit of work just to make sure that people have got the right mark, because there is a little confusion. But if you do have underneath that 100 hives, basically, you need to be testing that 48 number. If you've got underneath 48, test every single one of them for us. So very important. The QBA, just for the comfort of everyone on here, we had a catch up with our affiliate club executives on Wednesday night, and that was really great. We heard a lot of very interesting engagement that's going on, and it's very exciting to see our clubs really driving home this message about how important the surveillance program is, and that we're all playing a part as a collective effort in the future and getting the outcome that we want. So we do have the ability to leave a legacy for our kids ultimately, and that's what this exercise is about, making sure that we have really strong, healthy, robust bees for the future. I probably might even just throw this one out there as well. I was talking with a colleague in New Zealand earlier this morning, and I posed the question at him, interestingly, and I said to him, the question that I'd like to throw at you is a pretty straightforward one. You might think I'm silly for it, but if you had a choice to live free from varroa or had a choice to live with varroa, what would you choose? And he said, I choose not to answer the stupid question, Joe, because we would give anything to live without varroa. So in his terms, he explained to me the varroa mite is like the analogy of putting a frog in a bucket of cold water and then slowly boiling that frog. Initially, the frog's going to allow itself to swim around in that cold bucket. It'll enjoy itself. It'll be able to live fairly well. But the minute that you start gradually adding that heat, you're going to see the frog start to have struggles. And sorry for the frog analogy, but the frog's going to die once you boil it. I'm definitely not French, and I have no appetite for eating frogs. So please, if you can, get out there and support the national effort. There's so much information out there that is at your fingertips. QBA is a great source for a point of truth. As well, our national industry body, ARBIC, please, if you're not getting on board and supporting ARBIC, I don't know why. They are doing a great job at the very front line of this defence. If you haven't considered doing so, please think about not only supporting your local club, supporting your state industry body, and supporting your national industry body, because there is a lot of people behind the scenes from government and industry that are very passionate about protecting your interests and your welfare. So please, where you can, join in and do whatever's necessary. Mike, I can see that you have just jumped in and out a little bit. You might have had a bit of tricky service there, but please, the floor's yours for a question.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've had a lot of trouble with video and mic. This question's a little bit off to the side in that I want to support clubs. So I'm from the ABA and I've got Queensland clubs and club members. And what I want to do is get varroa set in resin so that our members can see what a real mite looks like. And I'm a bit concerned about this definition of prohibited matter and being varroa. Is that going to stop me importing these from a university in the US?
If they're in resin, I would like to say no. I would have to consult our legislation briefly, but we've done that before. We've had Asian honeybees in resin that we use for comms purposes. If it's dead and in resin, I don't think it'll be a problem. But if you want to make contact with us, I can look into that to verify. But I really don't think that's an issue. I've got some varroa mites in a little jar right here, so you can't get that message out if you can't show people. So I would really encourage that if you've got that opportunity. I think it's a great learning tool to show people what they're looking for, because this is what alcohol wash is. It's a self-assessment test. We don't have the resources where we can sticky mat test every hive. We're relying on beekeepers. You need to get in there and get your eye in and know what you're looking for. So I would really encourage, if you've got that opportunity and you can get that education out to the groups, then that's a really great initiative, because it's really up to beekeepers to self-assess their own hives at this point. So,
absolutely.
Yep.
Well, thanks for that. I
Absolutely.
will reach out to you to see if you can clarify at least the
we'll look
Queensland
into
side
that.
of the law.
Yeah, Mike, if you want to shoot me an email, statesecretary@qbabees.org.au. It would have been attached to the bottom of the email that was sent out earlier today, but feel free to touch base with me because I'd be happy to work
Will
with
do,
you.
right
Not a
away.
problem.
Yep.
No worries.
Thank you.
Any other questions at all? Everyone's dying to get away to go and potentially watch the Broncos get smashed this afternoon. I'm not sure. I'm not a football fan. I'm not a football fan. Rob is, so I'll take every opportunity I get. Look, guys, we might wrap it up there. Please, again, if you've got any questions at all, shoot them through to the info@daf.qld.gov.au. Alternatively, 13 25 23 is the only phone number you need to remember. If you've got mine, feel free to use it. But yeah, we are all here. We are all very passionate about the protection of our beautiful honeybees and doing everything that we can to protect your interest and your livelihood. So I thank you for being a part of our Toolbox talk today. I will do everything in my power to get this edited and uploaded into YouTube so everyone can watch later on. Thank you, Daniel, very much. It's good to see you in here. Rob, arrivederci for now.
Yes.
We'll catch up next week.
See you all next time for record keeping.
Record keeping 101. Thanks, Rob.
See you guys.
No worries. Bye-bye.
Hello, Queensland beekeepers. My name is Cameron Jack. I'm a professor at the University of Florida, and my primary focus is controlling varroa, small hive beetles, and any other pest or pathogen that could be ailing your bee. So I'm excited to be able to be with you in June, and I look forward to meeting you and hopefully to see and talk about some varroa-free beekeeping. I'll talk to you soon.